Is this for men also? Because some of us have to work for a living.
Who has to work for a living?
Who has work? What kind of work?
Who has to? Well, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know, we're working when we're working, but nice to have you.
Hi, Rick.
How are you? Thank you for joining. Okay, guys, so we're Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is a fascinating work, as you all know. And the way it's typically taught is, if everybody could please mute yourself. The way it's typically taught is section by section, chapter by chapter, which has value, of course. But I thought if we look at it holistically, if we look at it from the perspective of having gone through the whole book, tying it together with other important sources and connecting the key pieces. And that's what I'd like to do. So we're not going to go in any specific order. We're going to go in an order of concept, and we're going to connect it to other key perspective of Chazal in other areas, with the plan, with the goal, of course, of learning and growing. So the first one that we'll be doing today is the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, the first Mishnah. Before we read that, I want to give you what I believe is Rambam's takeaway from it, and then we'll back it.
I can't hear anything because people are not muting.
Okay, let's just hang on one more second here.
Someone's not muted, and it's
Yeah, everybody can please mute, would be great. All righty. Okay, if everyone can please mute, we're all set. Okay, perfect. All righty, excellent. Let's see. Okay. Okay, great. All right. Okay, should be okay. All right, great. So the Rambam in the 5th chapter of Hilchot Teshuvah, in his first paragraph, says as follows: Reshut l'chol adam netuna. A person has the opportunity to put himself, to direct himself in a certain place. Reshut l'chol adam netuna. You can follow in the Hebrew, English, whatever is easier. Im ratza lahatot atzmo lederech tova. If he wants to direct himself, to lean, so to speak, in a good direction, v'lehiyot tzaddik, and to become a righteous person, hareshut biyado. So we know that Rambam is very, very medakdek, very specific with his language. So let's take some of the key words here, because we're going to use the words of Rambam in this case to build not only today's learning, but some of the learning that follows. Reshut, a person has the ability, the choice that's given to him, that's netuna. Im ratza, if he wants to lean himself in the direction of good and to be tzaddik, he has that permission. Very, very worthy. And then Rambam compounds the challenge. He says, Im ratza lahatot atzmo lederech ra'ah. And if he wants to lean himself in the opposite direction and to be a rasha, he has that full opportunity as well. Rambam could have easily said, a person is held accountable for his actions. If a person does something good, he would get the reward for it. If he does something otherwise, he would get the consequence of that as well. But he takes a very different perspective. He seems to be suggesting a very ambiguous process. A person has the permission that was given to him to lean in a certain direction, good or otherwise, and then he can become a Sadiq, because again, remember Harambam says, he uniquely has that ability. So when Harambam speaks this way, we know we have to look deeply into his words and try to understand why the verbosity, why the redundancy, what are the nuances of what he's saying. But at the top line, we need to consider that Harambam is talking about a very fluid process, a process that in its truth is never absolutely X. And that's what we need to hold on to. When someone hits that button, when someone hits the Grand Slam button, the winner button, so to speak, it's not absolute and defined and in one spot. It's not stagnant. Okay, so let's hold with that for a minute. Okay, we'll scroll down to the actual Mishnah. The Yehuda Nasi, we know, was the redactor of the Mishnah. We believe he was from the family of David HaMelech. He comes from a very royal family. His father, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, was the head of the Sanhedrin as well. These were giants and the greatest of men. He says as follows, Ezehi derech yeshara, what is the straight path? Sheyavor lo ha'adam, what is that straight path that will become discerned or clear for the person? Kol shehi tiferet le'oseha v'tiferet lo min ha'adam. Pause. So the B, who of course preceded Harambam by many centuries, says, what is this straight path that the human being can take, can become discerned from? Something that becomes glory to his God and glory to the people around him. Good. Let's see what we got here. If we put Harambam together with the beginnings of the Mishnah, we have to own the following Torah-based perspectives. The first is the concept of derech, of path and process. So we need to know that the ultimate is the derech, the process, as they'll put in Western terms, the journey. That's the ultimate, is the derech. And with that in mind, Harambam, based on what Rabbi is writing, blows us away with an understanding of the word of Yosher or Derech HaYashar that we never would have considered. Let's go back and say like this. If we're going to say that the world is very structured, very yes and no, very right and wrong, then we would say that if a person is on a straight path, it means he or she is going straight, just like this. Person is going straight. But if a person is not on a straight path, he's not. The B says something altogether different. He says, A, the key is the derech. The key is the path. B, Yosher means to go like this. Yosher means that a person will be in the right direction, be pulled off that direction, whether through his own actions or others, make his way back, go back off, go back on, and that Harambam capsulizes based on the B, that's Yosher, that's straight, that's integrous, unreal. So when we talk about things like Shvila Zahav, the golden mean, and these people's life for us to make it crystal clear that no one is expected, and in fact, if someone is in the center of the road, not moving off that center point, he or she is not growing. And what's inherent and built into the system by design is yosher, being a straight person, which means I'm moving forward, and every time I get dragged off the path, I'm pulled back on. That's yosher. Remarkable. Not straight, not consistent, inconsistent. I'm over here, I attempt to grow in a certain area, I get pulled a little bit off. I come to an awareness of that. I make my way back. I move a little bit further. I get pulled a little bit off. That's derech hayashar. And that's a very important perspective that we need to own as people who hope to continue growing throughout our lives, as people who are guiding our children, that yosher is to acknowledge when I'm off the path and fight my way back, not to stay on it. I can, and really nobody will. With that in mind, it's important to own another key concept in Yahadut that, again, we should use forever in this context and in every context. And that is the distinction between Het, Avon, and Pesha. You would think that Pesha, which is doing something wrong intentionally to anger God or to spite God, would be the biggest challenge a human being has in this life. Not true. You would say, okay, then you might say, all right, maybe being that Pesha is something that's rarely done, that's not the human being's biggest challenge. We'll go up a step to Avon, which is a deliberate sin, and say that's a person's biggest challenge. The answer is, it isn't, because we all stumble, but most people don't intentionally, knowingly do something wrong. Our rabbis say that, you know what you got to be worried about? You got to be worried about chet. Chet is seemingly the least problematic, the most innocuous of them. Chet means I stumble into something. I'm a little bit lazy. I don't really chase down the halacha. I don't really work too hard at that. I'm going to let this one go. I don't really care all that much. It's the subtle stuff that people sort of stumble into. You know, you would call it an ongoing shogeg, you know, a sort of non-high thought action, non-high attentive action that we sort of stumble into from time to time. That we call chet. That, the rabbis say, is the most problematic, because that over time chips away at the person. That subtle, not being rigorous, not being on top of the halacha, not going that extra step to figure it out, not taking that extra step with the other person, that chet, that seemingly innocuous thing, that seemingly non-deliberate thing, which is deliberate, but it really comes from laziness or lack of attentiveness or lack of awareness, that our rabbis say is the biggest challenge. And that, if it goes unchecked, will lessen a person permanently. So let's put it together so far. We understand that Harambam, by design, adds a lot of extra language to say strongly that a person will lean in a certain direction, will put his focus in a certain place, will begin to build a certain way, and once he leans in a certain direction, puts his focus in a certain place, begins to build in a certain way, then he can achieve sikut, to be a righteous person. And of course, the opposite is true. He's building that based on the B, and his very important advice to us, which says that it is about the derech, it is about birur or borer, to discern that path over time. How do we become honest people, discerning our life and our growth? With Yoshed. Oh, what's Yoshed? Yoshed is fighting my way back, fighting my way back, fighting my way back. Now, how fabulous is that? Now, if you were to take the perspective that Yoshed means going like this, it would stint the human being, because you would never take a risk. You would never attempt to do something new. You would never attempt to grow in a certain area, because that growth might lead you to stumble, take me off my very, very rigid straight path. That's the antithesis of Yahadut. In Yahadut, we're constantly looking to grow. We're constantly looking to take on more, knowing that if I take on a new mitzvah or a new area of mitzvot or a new area of chesed or personal growth, or all the above, I'm for sure going to stumble. I'm for sure going to miss a bunch of things. You know, we make the same decision when we decide to have children. Wait a minute, wouldn't it be easier, chas v'shalom, not to have children? Wouldn't we make infinitely less mistakes as people? Wouldn't our lives be infinitely simpler? Would we ever do something like that? Of course not. We step in knowing we're going to be pulled off that yashad path. You know why? Because there ain't no such thing. The path of Yoshed means pull me off and bring me back. But there's a big caveat, and it's a fabulous one. Beware of that subtle stuff. Beware of the chet. The chet is, again, that seemingly innocuous, non-deliberate, I'm a little tired, I'm not going to pray Arbit. There's a minyan down the block, I don't know, I don't feel so much like doing it. You know what, I can amend this, I could be a little more rigorous in checking the kashrut on that, okay, it's okay. That's the most challenging side for a human being. And if a person is not sensitive to chet, to those subtle things, it's like chet is like when there's an hourglass with sand in it, there's a small crack on the bottom, and the sand just seeps out slowly without anybody really taking notice to it. That, our rabbis say, you got to be worried about. So is Yoshed this? No. Is Yoshed this? Yes. But this means not only do I make myself very aware of the overt stuff that I'm challenged by and want to improve in my life, I make myself very aware of the subtle stuff also, because the great growth is in the small stuff. Chet is the grand slam of being a better person, to the extent that I'm more aware, that I'm more medaktek, that I'm checking more, that I'm discerning more, that I'm pushing more, that I'm not letting the small stuff slip out. That's the homework. Good. Now we get another bombshell in this Mishnah. I think it's very, very exciting. I'm going to skip the Tiferet part for a minute and come back to it. He says, "Va'avei zahir b'mitzvah k'chamura." Be as careful with a minor mitzvah as with a major one, if you don't know the rewards of the mitzvot. Wow. 1 second. When it comes to a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, something that we shouldn't be doing, something prohibitive, we know very well, lo aleinu, the consequences of doing something wrong. Our rabbis are very clear on that. The punishment, God forbid, on doing something are very clearly articulated. So why would it be that when I do something positive, the overwhelming majority of rewards for the positive mitzvot are never outlined? We know there's sahad, there's reward, there's the world to come, there's building the human being each time I do a mitzvah. True. But why would the Torah go out of its way not to articulate the rewards of the positive mitzvot when it spends so much time giving graphic detail on the punishment of transgressing the negative mitzvot? And over here, the B is touching on another major concept in Yahadut that he compacts into the short mitzvah, and he says as follows. When it comes to all mitzvot, they are completely subjective. Now, what are we talking about? You can't be more non-subjective than the way the mitzvot and otherwise are articulated in the Torah. He says, no. A person's rewards or otherwise, in terms of his actions, are completely dependent on where the person is at that moment in his life. So, if I do a mitzvah when I'm 25, with these life circumstances, maybe I get X amount of reward for it. If I do it at 32 with different life circumstances, or a week later when I'm 25 years old and 1 week, and the circumstances change for me inside or overtly outside around me, the reward or otherwise is different, changes based on me. Wow. What could be more of a mind blower than that? You mean the legal system that the Torah articulates is almost completely subjective? It's almost completely dependent on where I am and how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling in order to gauge what its consequences are? Is that possible? And the answer is yes. The answer is it is. And it's true. So here the rabbi is adding a fabulous wrinkle. And again, these are paradigmatic insights. These are things that we have to hold and own as we build beyond this point. A mitzvah is no such thing as a minor mitzvah or a major mitzvah, other than those few yahareg, lo ya'avor, ba'al ya'avor, the capital crimes. Other than that, essentially not. And the reward, or otherwise, is overwhelmingly dependent on where I am, how challenging it is for me, how much I'm growing, what's behind it, what my children are up to, what decisions I have to make, what sacrifices I made to make it happen, and so on. That is a very, very important perspective. Let's take an example. In the positive commandments of Shabbat, we have one positive headline for Shabbat, which is Zachor, right? Zachor et Yom Shabbat Kadisho. As opposed to the negative mitzvot of Shabbat, the prohibitions, the things we have to safeguard ourselves from not doing, and those, as we know, are under Shamor, and those, as we know, include the 39 melachot that are identified in building the Mishkan, not in servicing it by building it. Fine. On the Zachor side, the positive side, we have two key areas of halacha for Shabbat. One is Kavod Shabbat, and one is Oneg Shabbat. And these I want to just highlight as perfect examples of the fact that the reward is completely subjective. Let's talk about Kavod Shabbat. What does Kavod Shabbat mean? Kavod Shabbat means that I take a role in the preparation for Shabbat. Lahabed, to honor something, to have high regard for something, means that I'm going to prepare myself to engage it. So, for example, if I have the zchut, if I have the great good fortune of being healthy and alive to enjoy a Friday night meal with my children or with whomever, with my spouse, then I prepare for that gift. I prepare for that blessing. And here again, that's a mitzvah, a positive mitzvah. So to what extent is the reward? It depends where I am. It depends how much time I have to put in. It depends how much I think about the people sitting at the table, for example, and what of my Divrei Torah, let's say, that I want to share that night, or what story of chesed that I intend to share would enrich their lives most. Kabod is also articulated in very mechanical and practical ways, where our rabbis say that a man who studies Torah every morning, if it's a question of him keeping his shiur on a Friday morning or going to the butcher for his wife, and you guys could share this with your spouses, going to a butcher for his wife, he's got to pause the class and go to the butcher. What are you talking about? Isn't Torah the ultimate paradigm? It absolutely is. But you know what else is an ultimate paradigm? The ultimate paradigm is preparing for Shabbat. I see something. Great. Okay. So in this case, the preparation is all about me and what I'm investing. So the primary benefit, of course, is going to come to me based on the level I'm able to engage Shabbat. But beyond that, that's the perot, the pre of my action. But the major blessing is going to come from the reward that follows. And that's overwhelmingly contingent on what was going on for me in my life getting there. Let's talk about one other element of the positive mitzvot of Shabbat, which is Oneg Shabbat, which would be the second klali, the second general positive of Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat means that I engage in the day in order to take from the day. I'm me'aneg the day. I bring pleasure to the day, so the day will bring pleasure to me. Good? I bring pleasure to the day, so the day will bring pleasure to me. What does that mean in practical terms? There are 4 areas that we focus on in terms of Oneg Shabbat. The first is tefillah, prayer. The second is Torah, learning. The third is mishpacha, my family, my children. And the fourth is me. And the ideal Shabbat shapes up like this. I engage in my tefillah sincerely, as we talked about, and many of us learned together, understanding the words, partnering with Borei Olam in the aspirations that are articulated in tefillah. And then I do learning. Men and women should be learning Torah on Shabbat with a book, their own book, building it themselves, outside of a class. To have a class, great. But even better is to build it with your own book, from your own library. That's even better. Our rabbis say that we have that neshama yetera on Shabbat. We have that extra soul, that heightened awareness on Shabbat, which makes our learning that much more potent. We have the practice, and we have it in our community as well, of eating a small piece of fish before each of the 3 mandated meals. Friday night, Shabbat lunch, and Seudah Shlishit. Because being that we want to be focused on learning to be ma'aneg, to bring pleasure to Shabbat, so it brings pleasure to us, we want to have a piece of fish which sharpens our minds, so our learning becomes better. Wow. So, first area of Shabbat, Oneg Shabbat, where what we put in will be what we take out, where our reward will be based on our effort, is praying. The second is learning. The third is family. And the fourth, and I hold possibly the most important, is me. In other words, what am I doing? Am I engaging the concept of minucha, of respite, in order to envision, to plan, to aspire, to dream how I'm going to build my life? God willing, God gives me another year of life. That's the personal Oneg Shabbat. So if we're going to hold that there is no absolutely articulated reward for a positive mitzvah, and it's subjective, and it's based on my efforts and my challenges getting there. The perfect example for that are the positive side of Hilchot Shabbat, brought down from Zachor as the headline, remembering, engaging, which dropped down to Kavod Shabbat, which is preparation, and Oneg Shabbat. Okay, let's begin to pull the pieces together. The rabbis continue and say, so we don't know the rewards or otherwise of the mitzvot, and then they touch on, consider the cost of a mitzvah against its rewards, and the rewards of a transgression against the cost. So what they're saying is, if we're going to do something, consider the win-lose scenario. The profits versus the assumed risk. But wait a minute, didn't you tell me a minute ago that I can't know the reward? So if I can't know the reward, and the reward is going to be based on my effort, how do you want me to consider what I'm giving up by not doing that mitzvah, right? Let's go back. We said that a person can't know the exact reward of a positive mitzvah by design, because it's based on where he is and what it takes him to get there. Great. And the more he grows and the more he aspires, it doesn't get easier by design. The more I want to reach, you get almost to the peak of the mountain, that last 100 feet is the hardest. The oxygen is the thinnest, right? So same thing here. What do you mean? You think a person has grown to a certain level. That last tip off, that last piece is going to be the easiest piece. It's not. It gets harder. Good. I got it. My reward is going to be based on how hard I work at something and how much I really make it me. Beautiful. So how can you follow that sentence with a sentence that I should consider the reward versus the loss and the loss versus the reward? I don't know the reward. So this leads us to Mishnah later on in the fourth Perek, the second Mishnah in the fourth Perek, which will go on more in detail. But let's touch on one of its key elements now, which says mitzvah goreret mitzvah and avera goreret avera. Meaning, when I'm considering my actions, according to the B, and I want to know that I'm moving in derech hayosher, right? Which now we understand is this, it's not this. And I understand that the subtle things like chet, those subtle mitzvot, those seemingly small ones, are the most important and life-defining. And I understand that the reward and punishment couldn't be more honest and true and fabulous than it is, because it's really based on where I am as a person. And it's all subjective. And the more I struggle and the harder I work, the more the benefit is going to be. Then when the rabbi says, but remember, before you make a decision, think about where you're going, we have to add in the insight from a Mishnah a couple of Perakim later, where it says that mitzvah goreret mitzvah, which means if I'm on a positive path and I'm growing and I'm doing good stuff and I create that positive energy multiplies and begets the next good thing. Good begets good. The opposite begets the opposite. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah, which means if I'm rolling and I'm growing and I'm learning, I'm probably happier, I'm more confident, I'm more excited about life, and I'm ready to take on the next mitzvah and the next mitzvah and the next mitzvah. One good thing brings another. So when I have to consider my derech, right, my road, do I know the exact reward I'm going to get from mitzvah A or B? No. But what I should know is I'm moving in a certain direction. And if I decide to pass on the challenge of taking on mitzvah X or reaching for mitzvah Y, remember, of course, I'm giving up the reward that would come from it. More importantly, the personal growth. But on top of all that, I'm lessening my ability to get back to that center because I'm sort of over here. If I grabbed onto that mitzvah, I'd be coming back here a lot sooner. Or if I'm over here, if I grabbed onto it, it would lead to another mitzvah that would bring me back there a lot sooner. So that needs to be considered. And finally, it says, Kol shehi tiferet lo osea. We go back a couple of sentences. Tiferet lo min ha'adam. What is tiferet, glory? What is glory? What does glory mean in our world? To be something to be glorified by God. It actually has. It's very interesting in that when something brings glory to God, it comes from a perspective of humility, not from a perspective of fleshiness. No, Oter Yisrael b'tif'ara, the bracha we say in the morning, doesn't mean make us glorious and fleshy. It means make us infinitely more powerful with the humility of the clarity of mind, of the pride of purpose, of the commitment of direction, of knowing who I am, of following, of reaching, of growing, of understanding that by design it ain't perfect, should never be perfect, and I should be constantly fighting my way back to the center. And I think that if we go back, and with this we'll wrap up and just open for questions. If we go back to what Harambam writes, Yeshut Netunah Adam, right? Everybody has the potential, the possibility to lean himself in a certain direction, and then to be good, and then to become a tzaddik. What is he talking about? He's talking about this whole type of mahalach, this whole type of process. So with this in mind, let's own the following. Derech, journey. Not black and white, not yes and no. Never, not until the last breath ever. Yosher, Yashar does not mean this. Derech HaYosher means this. Yehitparer means to refine, to discern, to figure out more. The idea is that never is there a black and white reward for something. It's all based on me and the growth that developed as a result of it. And when a person becomes sensitive enough and aware enough to start focusing on chet, on those misdemeanors, he needs to know that the rabbis attached to them the greatest import and importance, not the deliberate stuff, because those are the most defining. And when a person gets on a good track, good stuff begets good stuff, and good energy brings good energy. Okay. Thoughts, questions, ideas? Yeah?
Okay, Ricky, can I start? Can I
Yes.
ask? Okay.
Sure.
Would you include the 10 commandments in the mitzvot? Because to me, those are like the ultimate mitzvot.
Right. So the 10 Commandments, very good, beautiful. 10 Commandments are very, very exciting because we know going into the 10 Commandments that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never require anything of us that's logical or obvious to a human being. In other words, when it says don't kill and don't steal, what do you mean? By that time on the planet, civilizations had evolved to a point where people didn't kill and didn't steal, right?
They're doing it now.
Beautiful, right. They're doing it now. So we call the commandments dibirot. We don't call them mitzvot. We call them dibirot for a reason, because there's a dibur behind them. There's a mahalach.
Dialogue.
So it has to, so beautiful. We have to take the commandments, look at where the world was, and the Mefarshim do this, the commentators do this, because they're challenged by it immediately. They say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never bring a mitzvah of something that's obvious and logical, that we would figure out on our own. So what do you mean, don't kill, don't steal? What are you talking about? And some of the other things in there are also something that you would logically reason out. So the dibirot have within them much more to distinguish.
Right.
And it goes exactly along the lines of what we're saying. Yes. The
Thank you.
dibirot would absolutely apply to this. Yes. Great. Any other thoughts, questions? Mute, unmute. Unmute, good. We're all good? Okay.
Well, okay.
Great. All right, you all. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for accommodating.
Baruch. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ricky.
you so much,
Thank you.
Ricky.
Very happy to see
Ricky,
everybody
could
again.
Could you send me the recording so I could send
Yeah.
it out?
Will do.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thanks
Great.
again,
Thank you.
everybody.
Beautiful.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye.